I'll just talk about the what next for young people. The Honorable from Kenya ably talked about what is happening, but I want to borrow something that we picked from the African Mining Vision, I think, conference last year, either last year or this year. There's a lady that made a comment that was profound. When we're talking about the energy transition, she asked a very simple question. That as you're talking about the panels, the minerals, and all that, what do we do today, now? Because for her, it is firewood, it's charcoal. And people are talking about gas, people are talking about panels, and her question was simple, that as we wait for all those to come, what do we do now? I think it also comes back to most of the discussions that we've had for the past 3 days, and most of the solutions that have been suggested. I want to look at the solutions that we can actually do now. When we leave Dakar tomorrow on Monday, what do we start with? And I'll just suggest a few, and I'll just focus mainly on reimagining and remobilizing when it comes to young people. For us, I think it's about reimagining the debt question in terms of livelihoods. And it has been talked about how do we connect this conversation to the critical person, the ordinary person. And as I always say, averagely the ordinary person is a young person. So even with all that is happening, the question is how do we relate the debt question to the livelihoods of young people in our communities? And that is as simple as that. It is as simple as the reason as why we're seeing agitation is because people no longer have food in their houses. People no longer have the basics. You sleep not knowing what your family is going to eat tomorrow. Then a dictator will seem a possible good solution. So I think as we reimagined it, we should reimagine it in terms of livelihoods. When we're talking about loans, we should talk about them in terms of livelihoods, in terms of how many young people are going to go without food, without work, without basic necessities. And then there we can start that conversation. I always tell of a story that before I joined this movement, I used to be a student. The only day it made sense was when we were striking at Makerere. Every semester would strike about 3 times. We would lose about 6 weeks. And when we would ask why the strikes, and it was always about resources. It was always about money. It's either students striking because tuition is high, either lecturers striking because they've not been paid in a couple of months. It's either non-teaching staff striking because they need better pay. And that's when it made sense that abstract conversations about debt, about illicit financial flows, about everything else that we had talked about made sense because I was losing 6 weeks in a semester because Makerere didn't have about 6 billion Uganda shillings, which wasn't a lot of money. But at that point, it made sense that maybe something needed to be done. And I think for me, that is my what now. For me, when we got back to countries where young people don't have opportunities, jobs, that is the debt question, where we are being told that we are borrowing to invest in infrastructure so that it can enable or facilitate trade. But for me, the question then will be, what are we doing now? And I'll give just 3 suggestions, and then I can call it for us, like I said, we need to look mainly at the sectors of trade and services for young people. A lot has been talked about trade, but as we know that as the continent grows, a lot more of movement is moving from agriculture and the natural resource to mainly trade and services. And a profound statement was made in a certain forum where we would say that for the last 25 years, the only other region that has grown faster than the African continent has been China. So regardless of what we've said, regardless of our challenges, regardless of what, the only region that has grown in terms of production, in terms of population, in terms of, think about it, has only been Africa and next to China. So debt should be discussed in terms of trade, debt should be discussed in terms of services, the service sector that has some of the jobs that young people can do so that we can have the resources that we need when it comes to resource mobilization, the taxation and all that. The second one, I said I will talk about reimagining. So for us, we want to reimagine debt in terms of livelihoods. And I think that's the only connection we can make between ourselves and the young people that we are going to go back to. That the reason as why someone does not have food on the table is because we are spending 40% of our budget to pay back debt. That connection is easy, and I think that will strengthen our movement. Then in terms of remobilization, a lot has also been said about how do we bring in young people. And for me, I will just talk about the effects of technology in reaching young people. And I know it has been said a lot, but it has to be emphasized that when we are talking about remobilizing for a better African order where we make rules about debt, everyone must know. Everyone must know. And I'm glad that we had about 3 languages in this conference, even for people that are listening from across. I think the role of technology, and this doesn't just stop at Twitter, Facebook. There are other technologies that, for example, can transcribe the sessions that we've had into something that can be shared. There are other technologies that can help get the very last person to understand that they are not having a school is because someone else is taking their money. So for us, I think as young people, for us who are here, we are privileged, but there's quite a lot, over 250 million of us that will still need to hear this message. So as we remobilize, I think we need to embrace our technologies and make sure that we reach the young people that we need to reach. And maybe lastly, if we don't have a coup in Cameroon by next year, we should have AFCOD in Uganda. Thank you very much.